Good afternoon, everyone. I am calling to order the regular board meeting of the Vallecitos Water District for April 19th, 2023. I will now read the notice to the public. I'd like to announce that members of the public may watch the meeting live via computer or smart device by going to the district's website and clicking on the Watch Live icon. However, they will not be able to participate in the meeting remotely. Members of the public may also listen to the meeting live on their phone by dialing 888-788-0099 or 877-853-5247. When prompted, enter the meeting ID and passcode displayed on the district's website. We will now say the Pledge of Allegiance. Director Pennock, would you please lead us?
Sure. All right. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We will call the roll. Directors, please indicate your attendance. Okay, 4 directors present, Director Hernandez absent. Do we have any additions to the agenda?
We do not.
Okay, thank you. I will entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
I'll move to adopt tonight's agenda.
Motion by Director Elitharp,
Second.
second by Director Pennock. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Four pass and 1 absent. Do we have any public speakers this evening?
We do not.
Okay, thank you. We will move on to the consent agenda. May I have a motion to approve? Oh, sorry.
Presentations.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Let's see. Gotta look at my agenda. Okay. Moving on to presentations. I will turn it over to General Manager Pruitt.
Thank you, Vice President Boyd Hodgson. Just a few here. So every quarter we try to recognize some of the accomplishments of our staff, individual or groups, in several categories. So one of those categories is new hires. So we've had one new hire that took place between January and March, and that is Luis Bustamante. He's a construction worker. So he just joined us, 3-4 weeks ago, something like that. All right, next, Veronica Flores was promoted from cashier receptionist to customer service representative.
Yay, congratulations. Very good.
I need to see her sneak in back there. Congratulations, that's awesome. Another individual recognition, Dale Austin was recognized as the Mechanical Electrical Technician of the Year from CWEA, California Water Environment Association, for both San Diego County and the state. So
wow.
We previously recognized him for his county-wide recognition, but subsequent to that, he was recognized at the state level. So he was the guy in the whole state. So that
Fantastic.
was awesome. And he's not here tonight because he's down at the CWEA conference.
Yeah, I just made it back.
Yeah.
Important meeting. But
He's accepting his award down there.
Yeah, he's accepting his award. Couldn't make it here. So.
Yeah, he's still down there, but it was today.
Yeah.
Recognized today.
That's pretty awesome when one of our own is recognized at the state level, best in state. That's really awesome. So the last thing I wanted to point out is a group or organizational award, and our entire wastewater collections crew was recognized by CWEA as the top collections team in San Diego County. That was previously in the medium-sized category. That was previously done, and they were nominated or voted second in the state for the whole statewide. So that's pretty cool. Number 2 and number 1.
Congratulations.
So
that's great.
kind of fitting when you're number 2 in the wastewater category.
Oh.
But, yeah, congratulations. Awesome accomplishment, and we couldn't be prouder of the guys. So that's it for the recognition for the quarter.
Fantastic. Thank you, General Manager Pruitt. Congratulations to all the honorees. That's wonderful. We know that we have an exceptional staff here, and it's wonderful to see that recognized elsewhere. I believe next we have Jeremy Crutchfield of the San Diego County Water Authority to give a presentation on the desalination plant. Thank you for being here, and we appreciate your time. We know you're very busy. Thank you.
Yeah, so just a little intro. At a previous board meeting, I believe it was you, Director Boyd Hodgson, asked about information about the desal plant, so I reached out to Jeremy and asked if he'd be kind enough to come and join us. So he's here tonight to give a kind of a general overview, and at the end, I might pipe in a little bit about Vallecitos' relationship with the desal plant. So go
Thank
ahead,
you.
Julie.
Great. Good evening, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm a ratepayer at Vallecitos, so first time in the boardroom. But I did want to talk a little bit about, and I think we have a presentation. It might be popping up here.
Yep.
Talk a little bit about our adventure into seawater desalination in our region of the San Diego County Water Authority. I know our deputy.
Is his microphone on?
The light's on. Oh, now it's, red. Red means on. Okay, shoot. Okay, that's better. So I know our deputy director was here a few weeks ago or last month talking about the Colorado River and the program we have at the Water Authority looking at the supplies coming from the east. This here is our supply coming from the west. And a little bit about the Water Authority, where Vallecitos is one of 24 member agencies. We're directed by 36 board members, so it's nice to be in a little smaller setting, a little easier to navigate. So again, I really appreciate being here today. I won't spend too much time. Next slide, please. On this, Dan again was talking about the Colorado QSA supply. That was about 60% of our region's supply, meeting regional demands. The desal plant is 10%, and that's going to be around where we're standing for the next 25 years, is around that 9 to 10% of the county's water will be coming from seawater desalination. Next slide. I'll try again. No, this is not working. You can go back. Okay. I'll figure all this out. I've given a few board presentations in my life. This is usually not where I'm failing. Okay, there we go. So seawater desalination. The Water Authority's been looking at this for a long time. Our story is, in the early 1990s, we were fully dependent on water coming down from Metropolitan, imported water from Colorado River and the State Water Project. Big drought, big allocations in our region, and our region said never again, and diversification was the theme moving forward. And right at that point, seawater desalination was one of the things being talked about. And why was it talked about? One, it's a local supply. It's right next door. We have the biggest reservoir just to our west here, and it just made sense to be able to, with technology, innovation, to access that for drinking water supplies here in the region. It's drought-proof, drought-resilient. It's been identified by the state as a drought-resilient supply, so I'll get into some of the benefits that brings when we're talking about drought and allocations and how water works and moves throughout the region. It also brings a very high-quality water. Salinity is an issue that a lot of people are talking about. I know we don't have a lot of groundwater here in San Diego, but you need to monitor salinity. The Colorado River, salinity is continuing to increase. And so by pulling water out, yes, it's high salinity coming in, but coming out of the facility, it's very low salinity content, and that has significant impacts and benefits for our region. It also enhances our regional supply reliability. Obviously, I've talked about that. And then it also complements water recycling. Potable reuse is our next segment of water coming into the region, City of San Diego, East County, North County. And that's reuse. That's recycling the water that we have here. This is a new water supply, so they work hand in hand together to provide a resilient supply of water to the region. Okay, so the Carlsbad Desalination Plant is owned and operated by a public entity, Poseidon Water. It's a 30-year contract, so we've signed up to buy water from them for 30 years. Overall, it's a $1 billion investment, and I'll kind of get into the breakout of that. This plant produces anywhere between 48,000 acre feet to 56,000 acre feet, and it became online in December of 2015, so we're about 7 years, almost 8 years into operation. The project structure, this is a P3, a public-private partnership. Again, I talked about Poseidon being the developer of the project and the owner of the project. The Water Authority is the sole off-taker, so we buy all of the water that comes and generated from that plant. When we were developing the structure of this contract, the Water Authority offered the member agencies, all of our member agencies, a local supply component of the plant. If they wanted to buy into the plant, they could do that. Vallecitos was one of the parties that did, so did Carlsbad. So we entered into a uniform contract where Vallecitos secures 3,500 acre feet of local supply, high reliable, high resilient water from this desal plant. And so there's an ownership stake that Vallecitos has. As the developer of the project, Poseidon then contracted out to have the facility constructed. They used a design, build, operate kind of structure. They had an entity, Kiewit Shea, a joint venture between those two contractors to design and build the facility. The designer was actually Tetra Tech. Then they had IDE, which is an Israeli-based firm that specializes in seawater desalination. They operate many of the large seawater desalination plants around the world. They brought them to help set up the design and the process configuration for the plant, and they are the ones operating the plant now. So those are under separate contracts. I talked a little bit about the water purchase agreement. This was signed by our board in November of 2012, and it outlines the financial and commitments terms of between the parties. And most of this, through a P3, you're looking at risk transfer. And, being a private or public sector, we're kind of risk adverse. Private sector, they're the ones that are looking to take the risk, have the expertise, especially with seawater desalination. And so we entered into a P3 structure to implement this project. Through that, there was, here the second one, we talk about price certainty. And that's a little maybe incorrect. The price certainty component of it was there's 6 different components that make up how much we pay for the desalinated water. And 2 of them are scheduled payments. We know what that's going to look like through the 30-year term of the project. The other 4 are linked to electricity and O&M, both fixed and variable. And those were linked to Consumer Price Index, so it's index linked, or SDG&E rates. So that's kind of the fixed component. You can kind of have a feel of what that's going to look like. Now, there are some risks that the Water Authority retained, change in law being one of them. And so when you had the Ocean Plan Amendment that I'll talk about, that added some additional capital costs to our intake facilities, and that's a pass-through cost. So there's some risks, and we've seen electricity rates going up pretty, a lot more than anticipated early on in the days recently. So that's having an impact on our price. So price certainties, we know what we're paying for, we know what's passing through to us. There's some of it we can't control though. We do have a provision to buy out the plant after 10 years. So in a couple years, we could purchase the plant from Poseidon and make it a public asset. But after 30 years, the asset just transitions to the Water Authority as a public asset. We pay $1 for it. A little history on the development of the project. It takes a long time to build and get a seawater desalination plant online. There were 9 years of environmental and CEQA compliance to kind of get to the point where we could actually start construction. So it took a lot to get there. There were 14 lawsuits throughout the process. The Water Authority prevailed on each one of those. Most of those are coming from the NGOs and the environmental community looking at different things, whether it's greenhouse gas emissions, cost. A lot of it's CEQA-driven, climate action plan-driven. So we have a plant out on the coast, and the Water Authority's infrastructure is inland. So we also had to build a pipeline to bring the water from the plant into our regional infrastructure. We also contracted with Poseidon to build that through a design-build agreement. The Water Authority is the owner of that pipeline, though. They used the same contractor, Kiewit Shea, to build that. It was a 10-mile pipeline, 54 inches diameter, through Carlsbad, Vista, and San Marcos. So here are the components and how the water gets into our regional system. On the left, you can see the desal plant and then the 10-mile, 54-inch new pipeline that was built as part of this project. That brought it over to our second aqueduct. On the right-hand side, the two blue lines on the right are pipelines 3 and 4. Those are treated water pipelines, large diameter, bringing water typically from north to south. Up top is our Twin Oaks Valley Water Treatment Plant. That's a 100 million gallon per day traditional treatment plant. And we wanted to get the desal water up to that area because that's where all of our treated water kind of comes together. So that way we can serve a melded treated water supply that has similar characteristics to what our customers were seeing already. And everybody kind of gets that melded water. So it's not seawater desalination goes to one part of our service area. Everybody, 95% of our customers see some portion of desalinated water. To get the water up there, we had to reline and repurpose one of our lines, pipeline 3, which is highlighted in green on the right. And then we did some other improvements at Twin Oaks to receive that desal water and blend it together. Now, Vallecitos had where we connect to our infrastructure, Vallecitos had their Val 9 service connection. It's a treated water flow control facility. And so it was very easy to plumb directly into the Vallecitos connection there and provide treated water, desal water, 100% desal water to Vallecitos. We did a lot of monitoring of water quality. When you're introducing a new supply, a new source of water, you want to make sure that it's the system's receiving it well, and so there was a lot of monitoring, a lot of coordination with Vallecitos and all of our member agencies as they started to receive desal water, and it's a high quality water that provides actually some benefits when you look at disinfection and keeping a high level of water quality and fresh water in the system. So I mentioned that the total price of the project was about $1 billion. The plant itself was a little over $500 million. The conveyance pipeline about $160. The financing, and I'm an engineer by trade. I sat through my first plum and flom and all these, financing opportunities to bring in some of the capital for these projects, and so I understand the financing cost and how that all works. That was a large component. Water authority improvements and oversight, those are those projects we had to do to our existing system, was about $80 million, and that gets you to the $1 billion. Now, at the bottom of here, I've shown what our price is that we pay to Poseidon for every acre foot of water that we purchase from the plant. It's just under $3,000. This was in the letter that we provided to Vallecitos. Every year we give a notice to Vallecitos on what the next contract year is going to look like in terms of price per acre foot. So this is what we provided in the letter. Now, that doesn't account for the increased electricity that we saw in January. And also, I'll talk a little bit about the new intake project and what when that facility comes online, we'll have another bump in price. So you can see this is about 2 times as expensive as what we pay for imported water coming in from Metropolitan. And how that translates to customers is you see about a $5 increase in your monthly household water bill. So the resiliency, the reliability, and that protection of having water when you turn on your faucet that comes from the desalination plant is about $5 a month per household. As I mentioned, here, this is a timeline of the process. We started thinking about desalination in the 90s. In the late 90s, that's when the Carlsbad plant kind of rose to the top, or the location rose to the top. And it was just a long period of feasibility studies, and then the CEQA and permitting process, financing, and then construction was only actually 3 years to construct the plant, which got us to operation in 2015. This is a picture of the facility. It's located in Carlsbad, adjacent to the Agua Hedionda Lagoon. The reason they selected this location is it was co-located with the Encina Power Station. That's where the stack used to be in Carlsbad. They have decommissioned that facility, and it's now been demolished. but they had existing intake and discharge facilities in place, and we were able to piggyback that so you didn't have to construct a pipeline out into the ocean or two pipelines out into the ocean for your feed water into the plant and then your discharge of brine. So how it works is water naturally comes into the lagoon area and into intake channels that were used for the cooling water for the power facility. We tapped into those cooling channels and bring 100 million gallons of seawater to the plant to make 50 million gallons a day of high-quality drinking water. So what happens to the other 50 million gallons? That is the brine, the high-content salt water. It goes back into the ocean. We dilute it before it gets into the ocean and then send it out into the ocean. And within 500 feet of its discharge point, it's non-detect. You can't tell that you're putting a different water source into the ocean water. So the environmental components, the monitoring are very strict, as you can imagine, in California. This plant has had no violations that have had any impact to marine life, sediment, high content brine discharges. The system is operating as it's intended, and it's being monitored very closely to ensure that that environmental standard is met every month, every day. This is a process flow diagram of just kind of how the water moves through the plant. I have some pictures just to give a feel for what it looks like in the facility. The pictures are always better than engineered schematics. But the upfront phases are pre-treatment. They're pretty standard and typical for water treatment. You have natural media filters, and then you have a second phase of pre-treatment that are cartridge filters. The intent there is to remove suspended materials that are in the feed water. You don't want those to go further in your process stream and damage the equipment downstream. Reverse osmosis membranes, that's the muscle of the facility. That's what separates the salt and the salt from the water. This is also what's driven by high energy production, or high energy consumption. You need to pump the water up to about 900 pounds per square inch to push it through the membranes and get that separation of salt and high quality water. We then put some hardness back into the water and do some post-treatment, standard as most treatment facilities, before it goes out into the public as high-quality drinking water. These are the filters, the pre-treatment filters. It's 3 different layers of gravel, sand, and anthracite. The water settles down. The suspended solids get stuck in the material. Every so often, you blow air from the bottom, suspend those materials, get the things that captured to the surface, scrape it off, and that's how you get that out of the process stream. Some challenges that we've had at the plant are algae blooms, high organic materials after storms, and what happens is these clog more rapidly, so you're in backwash more frequently. And so the Poseidon has made capital improvements under their own dime to improve that process. The reason they want to do that is because they don't make money unless they produce water. So if they're offline because of this, they're not making money and we're not being harmed. So that's one of the protections of the water purchase agreement. So we didn't have to pay for any of those capital improvements. That's done on their own dime to make the plant more resilient and more efficient. And they continue to do that all the time. This is the second phase of pre-treatment. In those the gray canisters in the back, there are cartridge filters. Those are disposable filters. They last about 7 weeks, 8 weeks, and they're replaced as they capture material and suspended solids. This is inside the reverse osmosis building. There are those white vessels that you see are pressure vessels. There are 8 membranes in each one of those. Over 2,000 pressure vessels in this building, so 16,000 membranes. It's like an airplane hangar when you walk in there. It's a pretty cool site. But this is where the majority of the treatment is taking place. And once the water goes through the membranes, it's almost at distilled quality. Everything's stripped out of the water at that point. This is the same technology that potable reuse projects are using in their plants as well. one of the reasons why seawater desalination became viable in the U.S. and in California and for wholesale purposes are these devices. These are energy recovery units. It reduces the energy load of the facility about 45%. So electricity is 35% of what we pay for this. So if you're reducing that component by half, that has a very significant impact on the price you pay for water. If you're interested in how these work, see me afterwards. There's some cool videos, and it's a really neat process. It's not rocket science. There's no electrical features. It's just all mechanical and just energy transfer. It's pretty impressive. And then this is on top of our product water tank. The blue pipe you see here is the 54-inch diameter pipe, so you can kind of get a feel for the size. The pumps in the background are vertical turbine pumps, and that's what sends the water from the plant all the way up to the Twin Oaks clear wells. It's 15 miles, 1,000-foot lift. So these are pretty heavy-duty pumps that they have here at the facility to get the water into our regional system. And then I'm going to spend a little time here on this slide. These is a rendering of what we're doing out there right now. These are our new intake facilities. So that this project was driven for two reasons. One, when the Encina power station went offline, we had to replace their pumping system and that flow of water that they had generated. We could no longer piggyback on what their operations were doing. And so we installed new fish-friendly dilution pumps. Those are shown kind of on the right where you see all the piping coming above ground and going back under. There's three large vertical turbine pumps in there, and they're deemed fish-friendly because of their design. And it was a requirement of the Ocean Plan Amendment through the state to implement this type of pumping structure at the facility when you're implementing seawater desalination projects. And so these are state-of-the-art pumps to protect fish if they happen to get through past the screens and into the flow of water. They can make their way up through the pump and survive that passage. So that was completed in June of 2020 as an interim phase of implementation that allowed the power plant to be decommissioned and demolished and keep the plant online. What we're working on now is what's in front of that. You can see a new concrete deck that is going to be built out over the lagoon. And then in front of that, you have new screens. And these are 1 millimeter screens. Their size, so fish, little larvae and little fish cannot get through. And then the size of it maintains a low approach velocity. So you don't have this big vacuum of water being sucked into the plant. The velocity of water is less than 0.5 feet per second. So little fish can swim away and they don't get impinged or sucked through the screens. So this is really what was required out of the Ocean Plan Amendment that the State Water Quality or the State Water Resources Control Board implemented in 2015. It took us a long time to permit and work through that. We're the first facility to do this. So we were learning, but so were the regulators, and we were helping bringing their staff online or up to speed. And this project is going to take about 2 years to build, and once they're in service, the cost to implement this project will be wrapped into the unit price of water. So last slide here. The plant's been online for over 7 years. It's proven that you can do seawater desalination without harming the environment in a safe and efficient way. We've produced over 105 billion gallons of water, which is about 10% of our region's supply. It's our largest source of local water here in the region, and the price is what's always gets kind of pushed back on when you start looking at these potable reuse projects that are coming online or being developed. You're going to see a comparison, a compatible price structure for those projects as well. There's no cheap water out there anymore, and we need to do what we can to make sure that the San Diego community, our businesses, our residents, our quality of life have the water when we need it, and this is a facility that will provide that. So I'll stop my presentation there, and I'd be happy to answer any questions from the group.
Jeremy, I'd just like to thank you for taking the time to come out here and educate us quite a bit more. So we really appreciate that. Just in talking about the intake modifications, I was absolutely stunned at the cost of it, and I was thinking an order of magnitude lower than it came out to be, and it's about half of the original plant construction cost and about a third of the total project cost. I guess I just want to ask you, any more surprises coming as far as things we're going to be on the hook for?
I really hope not. No, so we're not aware of anything else in the future that would be a change in law or a change that would be required to be implemented on the facility. So this was a surprise to us as well when we, early planning, and we knew this was going to happen. When we signed the WPA, we knew something would have to be done, and then when the state came in with their new regulations, that upped the game quite a bit. But even when that happened in 2015, we didn't anticipate this level of cost. It's driven by two things: the construction market, the materials, the equipment. Everybody's seeing this and being hit by this. All construction projects have been hit by that. And then where we ended up landing on how to implement the OPA at this facility was a very complex construction. It's construction in water. That deck is built on 90 piles that are driven into the sandstone. So it was a very challenging negotiation to get there, and the price, it's high. We got it down quite a bit.
Okay, thanks.
But, yeah.
One other question. How do we get the other 6 basin states in the Colorado River to invest in some additional desal in the future and offload some of that California water off of the Colorado River?
So we're,
You don't have to answer it.
Yeah, no, yeah.
I think it's a big challenge, but I think it's part of the solution long-term on the Colorado River is for that investment to happen in California.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say is we obviously have a lot of people that come to the plant from the federal level to state level, and we're always looking to educate and show what our plant's able to do. And there is we've demonstrated that it can be done, and it can be done effectively. It can be done in an environmentally protective manner. And so it makes sense that this is part of the resilient profile that our governor's looking at and the state needs, and the Colorado River Basin.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you again for your presentation, and this does go on YouTube, so others from the public can rewatch it, and I'll share it with my family. I thought it was really cool to get the behind-the-scenes look. I intend to tour the facility in the future. My question is, does Poseidon share any of the cost of the $350 million?
So they, for the new intake?
Correct, yes.
Yes, so the new intake is a result of a change in law. So that will flow through to the Water Authority and to our ratepayers. The same protections that we had in the water purchase agreement for the plant apply to this as well. So there are protections, but those costs do flow through, and there's no responsibility on that because it was a change in law for Poseidon.
Got it, so that's a no.
No.
Got it.
Thank you. Impressive. 2 quick questions. You mentioned that the 10% of regional demand or that supply that you're providing, and it's going to stay the same over the 20 years. Is that because of supply issues or demand issues, or why would that not increase?
So we're projecting that demands will slowly increase over the next 20 years, and then member agencies are having their local supply projects, so it baselines us as kind of being a straight line in what the Water Authority is providing to the region. As demands go up and then a local project comes online, it brings our deliveries down. So the Water Authority's deliveries to member agencies is staying pretty flat, and so that's why it stays around. The desal component's not getting bigger or smaller.
Still, okay, thank you. And then you mentioned, I like these, I'd like to see that, to reuse the energy, reuse the 45%. However, I don't know if you can disclose, but as SDG&E's bill has gone up, how has that affected you guys? That's got to be huge, because the amount of energy used is this 24/7? Those-
It's a 24/7, 365 facility. Power is 35% to 38% of what we pay,
Okay, that's what I
so,
was gonna ask, so 36, okay.
Yep.
30, okay.
yep.
Which is, are you able to disclose that bill on a monthly basis, just for us layman guys?
If I would want to give you a correct number, I can provide that, though, yes.
It's gotta be massive.
It's
Over the last 6 months, it just.
$10 million on a monthly, on a high production month is what we pay to Poseidon, so $3-4 million of that would be SDG&E.
Okay, that's fair. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for coming. We're very grateful that you provided us with this presentation. You know, one of the opportunities that we have as board members during this time is to help educate the public, and I think that you've done a fantastic job sort of sharing with us the background for desal. So thank you. I do have a question. In your presentation, you mentioned that there was a buyout option in 2 years, and then at the end of the 30-year period, it transitions to the County Water Authority automatically. Why would there be a buyout option in 2 years? I was just curious. I didn't understand why that would be part of the contract.
I think the water purchase agreement prescribes what that buyout looks like between year 10 and year 30. So it's a return of, a payment of the debt that remains on the project and a payment on the equity that was put into the project. And so I think we weren't seawater desalination experts when we signed the WPA, when the project came online. But if there was an opportunity in the future to bring that expertise in-house and take over ownership, there's advantages. Now we're not stuck under the risk transfer components of the commitments of the water purchase agreement. We have more flexibility on how we utilize that facility. So it was just kind of an option. I don't think we've ever really envisioned that we would, year 10, we're purchasing that plant. But having that flexibility and that option and being able to understand the plant, get to know it better, and then have that option was attractive at the time of the WPA being signed.
Thank you. General Manager?
Yeah, just going to add a few things. First of all, thanks, Jeremy. Just want to add a few things. So Jeremy mentioned that we're only one of 2 agencies that actually entered into a water purchase agreement to get a share of this, but we are the only agency that has a direct pipeline connection. So Vallecitos is the only agency that gets direct desal water, which is pretty cool, I think. It's about 25% of our annual supply. We usually take about 14,000 acre feet, so 3,500 acre feet is about 25% of our supply. And Jeremy mentioned that this adds about $5 per typical single-family customer. That's for the County Water Authority average, but for Vallecitos, it's much more. When 25% of your water is the most expensive water you can get, our customers are paying more than $5 a month. And I want to brag about my team because we're still the 3rd lowest rates in the county, and we have the highest blended imported water supply. So we're doing something right, and it's great quality water, and we're happy to have it. But just want to give a little local flavor to that.
Any other comments or questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Okay, I think our next presentation is the Association of California Water Agencies, Joint Powers Insurance Authority, Aqua JPIA. Chief Executive Officer Andy Sells and Assistant Executive Officer Adrian Beatty will present information on the JPIA and their refund process.
Okay, well, thank you, and I brought reinforcements with me. I know this is kind of a tough area here, so I did bring reinforcements with me. I have, in addition to Adrian, David Drake. You know David. He is a director there at Rincon and also sits on our executive committee. I also brought Kevin Phillips with us. This is day 3 for him at the Aqua JPIA, a new hire for us. He will be our Director of Member Outreach. Kevin was actually the general manager at Paradise Irrigation District when the fire went through there and had managed that process, was most recently at the town of Paradise. So he brings a water knowledge component to JPIA that will help us moving forward. And then, of course, Adrian. I am the executive officer here for 5 months and 11 days. And then at that point, the executive committee has chosen Adrian to be the next executive officer here at JPIA. I will be retiring at the end of September. So just to bring you up to speed a little bit here. So we do have a brief presentation here. And so, oh, it's up there, not here. Huh. I went past my brief presentation, didn't I? Okay. Just a little bit, and then I'll turn it over to David here. The JPI, there's about 400 water agencies that participate in the Joint Powers Authority here. All of those water agencies are individual water agencies. We don't have any like city water department or county water department. All of them have their own elected board, and that's one of the requirements. All of the water agencies that participate in our risk-sharing pools are members of AQUA. That also is a requirement in that process. As I said, we're only public water agencies. There is a membership requirement. It's not as easy as it once was to get into JPI. I think when we started, we had about 83 members was our starting point. Now we're at a little over 400. You know, to join in that program now, it takes, there is an evaluation process. As a matter of fact, the Water Authority is going through that. Did he leave already? Water Authority is going through that process now. We're couple hundred hours into evaluating whether they're a good risk, because at this point we're doing well, and if we bring somebody in who maybe is not up to what our average is, then that would be more losses to the pool, and that would increase the cost to Vallecitos or Vista or Buena Vista up north there. So we are pretty particular about how members come in. Most of the time it takes like a little service, what we call a service plan. It takes, you know, somewhere between 12 and 18 months so that they get up to speed there to do that. We're looking at that process. So there are those membership requirements. We have actually removed members in the past from the program who didn't quite perform as well. Central Basin over in the LA area comes to mind. The board elected not to continue our relationship, partner with them. We did create a stabilization fund that we'll talk about a little bit later. And, you know, as I said, we started with 83. I think around 78, 79 of them are still on the program with us. With that, I'm going to ask David to talk a little bit here, push the button and make humorous pay.
I'll do my best. Thank you. Nice to see everybody. And also I want to thank you for your support on the LAFCO Commission. So they just announced the LAFCO winners. I'm one of the winners of LAFCO along with Barry Willis, and so we're very happy to have your support. And LAFCO is a hell of an education, I'll tell you. There's just one thing after another. And now we just had that minor detail about La Jolla, so we'll see what happens. What you're looking at is the top level of the JPIA, and these programs are very specific and featured very carefully to each of our members. Each of our members carries an experience modification number that's unique to them, and each of these sites has a director on the board of the executive committee. I, for example, chair workers' comp. Other people chair other committees, and then there's a staff director who also supports that. And there are about a dozen members of our membership that sit on the committees that manage these things. So these are highly specific to making the water process as safe as possible and as risk-free as possible. The employee benefits was the most recent one that we added. We've got 7,500 employees in workers' comp. Employee benefits is probably double that. And that's been a very large and profitable business for us. And in fact, frankly, we've been adjusting fees down. Whoever does that in healthcare anyway, we do that very well. The big problem is the upper right in property. Stuff burns. And I don't have to ask Kevin too much about that to have him explain how badly that's affected us. So we've had several major fires, floods, landslides, pipe breaks that have impacted all of us. Thank heavens for the concept of pooling, because we all share in those losses together in an equitable way. And that's how it works. The downside is some years you get a big check back from us. Hooray. Every once in a while you have an investment year, and this is one of those investment years. We're also adjusting the time span from 4 to 5 years that we integrate those costs over to try to make it more equitable for all parties and to frankly reduce the cost to try to keep those costs down. Liability just continues the way it is, and there is an enormous effort to make sure we are doing our best to do best practices with our clients. We've had some terrible situations where, for example, 2 teenagers were electrocuted in the Central Valley, and we learned the cost of a typical teenager is $7 million. And that's the kind of process we often have to go through to mitigate risk and to extend it, the risk to all parties. If I do this right, I went the other way, I went the wrong way. Let's try it again. I'm an electrical engineer, I should know better. The retrospective premium adjustment is easy for me to say, and you see all those smiling faces there of happy districts getting their money back. It's actually a very complicated process. It's an extremely large, challenging spreadsheet and other ERP systems that drives what the costs are, what the benefits are, and how we deliver these funds. If you've ever seen the charts that come out there in gruesome detail down to the penny about how much money comes back to our members. This year, it's just not that way. We are having to do an investment year, and so the checks going out are about 1% of what they used to be. So it's a sad issue. However, we're on it like crazy to make sure that the process continues well, that it's financially sound, and that's the structure of what's happening there. I think I've got one more, if I understand it right. Yeah. This is the governance picture, and you're looking at a fraction of the governments here. The board of directors and the membership really are driving this. We have hundreds of members that sit on the big board, and then we have the executive committee, and I'm a member of that. I'm the vice president. And then those committees that you saw earlier on finance and audit, liability, property, workers' comp, employee benefits, risk management, work down again with an executive committee member on each committee and staff members on each committee, and then about a dozen people who represent the whole membership of the group. In the upper right-hand side is the California Water Insurance Fund, and we formed this just about 3 to 4 years ago, and Andy could correct me on the exact number, but Andy carried forward from one of the other pools the value of this. It turns out that we have a long-term picture of looking at our money, and the longer we can run, frankly, the better we do. But the state of California restricts what we can invest in. By forming a separate corporation and incorporating it outside the state of California, we've been able to get a better return, a more careful return, and so our reserve funds sit there, but it can be brought back in to pay what we've used this for. And Adrian, I'm sure, is going to talk about the tiers of insurance. We have pulled in and invest ourselves in that money in our risk process, and that creates a very much more effective financial mechanism for us that we can use that time better. This year, of course, the economy has hit us hard. We've got some unrecognized losses, but not as bad as it could have been, so that's not a problem for us, again, because time lets us sell off that stuff at a later point. I think that's my last slide. Adrian? It's up to you.
Touched on several slides.
I did.
David stole all of my thunder, so you don't need to hear from me. So I'm going to give you just a little bit of background on our 4 major pooled programs. David did a fantastic job of hitting the high points of some of that. Our liability program has about 345 members. We self-insure. All the members pool in the risk of the first $5 million of every loss. We also, but we want to offer higher limits to our members. So the total tower is $55 million in limits. It's not cost effective to self-insure all of that risk. So then we go with our broker to the commercial market and look for reinsurers and excess insurers to fill up the rest of that tower. As you can see from how it's structured, no one carrier wants to take all of that risk. So it gets kind of sliced and diced both horizontally and vertically based on who is willing to take what level of risk and at which layer. One thing that is interesting that we've done, and David touched on CWIF. So there's multiple benefits to the captive. Certainly a benefit is that we can invest out longer term with all of our monies from all of the pools, all of the reserves, but we can also deploy the captive in layers where they're needed. So that 10x of $10 million layer there, we have deployed the captive there the last 2 or 3 years About 3 years ago, we had the carrier that was in that layer come back and offer us a rate increase that we thought was unacceptable. And how building of these towers works is the lead layers or the lower layers pretty much dictate how the pricing goes further up the tower. I call it lazy underwriting. The lead layer will do very thorough underwriting, but then all of the layers above that will say, oh, well, Safety National gave you a 10% rate increase. That's what we want too. And they'll just build on top of that. So the carrier that was in that layer wanted more increase in premium than we thought was reasonable. And so we were able to deploy the captive in that layer and save about $1.5 million in premium and have continued to use it in that layer. Historically, this program has been very stable. I think we've only had 3 losses that have ever exceeded $10 million. Unfortunately, one of those was that very unfortunate event with the boys that were electrocuted. That was about a $15 million claim. But typically our loss history has not been, has been very good, and that has led to stability in rates. So this is a historical timeline of what our rates have looked like over the last decade. And as you can see, we raised rates for the first time in actually the last 15 years this past year. We did have to raise rates by 10% because of several losses, including the electrocutions that impacted. Those years, we didn't collect enough money to fund the losses that occurred. 9 times out of 10, and Andy will talk about this more, we over-collect. We fund very conservatively. The executive committee is responsible for approving rates, and they're very conservative in how they set those rates. 9 times out of 10, we collect more money than we ultimately pay out in losses. But we've had some years in the liability program that are underfunded. It is kudos to the captive and the careful work that the executive committee has done in building up our reserves, that those rates have stayed flat as long as they did, and that we were not having to do a rate increase until this year. If you have any connection with your counterparts in cities or school districts in this area, they have not had flat rates or rate decreases over the last decade. They've had skyrocketing rate increases for things like civil rights violations, sexual abuse and molestation claims. Those are not claims that we have to worry about here in JPIA because we don't have police officers, we don't have firefighters, we don't have school children. Property program, this has been our most problematic program over the last 3 or 4 years. Prior to that, this program was kind of our golden child. We didn't really have a lot of losses, and then wildfires, yay. So we have about 287 members in this program. We have actually over $11 billion in total insured value. You can see that this schematic of the tower is much more complicated than liability. It is by far the most complicated tower that we have to build. You can see some of those carriers are only taking 3.5% of a $25 million x of $25 million layer. Carriers really don't want to insure property losses in California. That being said, we did have a layer, that London layer that's 23% up there of that 25 x 25. They used to be our layer from $100,000 to $10 million. Last year at our renewal, they offered us a renewal that was not palatable. They basically wanted to charge us about $4 million for us to pay the first $7.5 million of any losses that were going to hit that layer. So again, another benefit of the careful and conservative reserving that the executive committee has done. Because we have reserves on the books, we chose to bank on ourselves, and we increased our retention from $100,000 to $10 million. That being said, none of us want to sit at that retention for very long, and we've made some very significant adjustments this year. We changed our broker to a different broker, and we are looking to have this schematic look very different as of July 1. We'd like for there to be about half as many carriers in that tower, and we are looking to drop that retention from $10 million down to something that's more reasonable for a program our size, which would be in the $1 to $5 million range. I think in the last 15 years, we've not had total losses for any program year that exceeded $3.5 million more than 3 or 4 times. So a per occurrence retention of $1 to $5 million would be perfectly reasonable for us to have, and that's what we're aiming for. As Andy mentioned with the wildfires, we have had losses. We did have to raise rates by 20%. We have had less stability in rates in this program. We had many years, 10 years ago, that were flat or reducing, and then we had several in the 30s of millions of dollars wildfire losses that have caused those rate increases in the last 3 years. And also is a significantly contributing factor to the lack of refund checks this year. Workers' compensation, this is kind of our golden child right now. We have 204 members in it. We cover, actually it's over about 8,000 employees right now. That is a very simple tower, which is why we don't even show it on the slide. We self-insure the first $2 million. We have one carrier that takes from $2 million up to statutory limits. Statutory limits means that whatever the state says you have to pay for a workers' compensation loss, that's what the pool will pay. We cover 100% of those costs. We had a flat rate renewal this year, and actually a testament to the executive committee's conservative nature. We recommended that we actually could have taken probably a 5 or 10% rate decrease this year. They wanted to hold flat just to make sure that we didn't have something unforeseen happen that caused a sort of run on the equity for this program. It's also important to know that the equity of the programs all get kind of mixed together when we're looking at doing our retrospective premium adjustments, which Andy will talk about the details of that. So the workers' compensation program having significant amounts of equity helps offset years that are underfunded on both the liability and property programs. Our carrier that is sitting above $2 million statutory, we are on a 2-year rate guarantee. That's very difficult to receive, so that's just a testament to how efficient this program is running. And historically, we have not raised rates in the last 15 years, and in fact have decreased them twice in that period of time. Employee benefits, we have about 267 members in this program. This is an interesting program because in the property and the liability and workers' compensation programs, if there are dividends, we can cut you a check, and that's when we bring you the big Ed McMahon check. You can't really do that in an employee benefits program because a lot of districts, there's a cost-sharing component between the employees and the district for the premium. So if we gave you a check refunding money from employee benefits, you then now have the obligation to figure out how much of that money is the district's versus each individual employee, including employees that aren't here any longer, what of those monies are from what program year. So the way that we're able to give refunds back in the employee benefits program is by subsidizing the rate. So we had an interesting thing happen over COVID. We collected, because nobody knew what was happening, we collected assuming typical trends in using medical insurance, medical expenses. But that didn't happen. Anything outside of emergency services were not being used. There were no elective surgeries. People weren't getting hips replaced, knees replaced. So our costs were significantly lower. So our equity grew pretty significantly. So in order to get that money back to the members, this year the costs have started to creep back up. People are going back to the doctor. They're doing elective surgeries and routine annual physicals and things of that nature. Also, the cost of medical treatments has increased pretty significantly. So we approved the executive committee, I should say, approved a 10% rate decrease, knowing that that was going to be less money than the costs we expected to incur. That was our way to get money back to the members. So we deliberately undercollected this year. We also have done that the last few years. So we had a 10% rate decrease this year, 5% rate decrease the year before, and 3 years of flat rates, which is also pretty remarkable for an employee benefits program. We do anticipate, though, for anyone who does the budgeting here, that those rates are going to go up. We have used a significant amount of equity, which was the plan, to get money back to the members by dropping the rate by 10%. We do anticipate that in 2024, the rate will probably increase by at least 10%, and we'll have rate increases in years going forward. And with that, I will turn it back to Andy.
We're doing the tag team show here. I should have, Adrian, what's your background?
I'm new to water, but I've been in the risk pooling industry for about 18 years. I've worked with 7 different risk pools across California and state of Washington. I worked for the State League in Washington, running their property and liability risk pool there that insured about a third of the cities and towns in the state. I've worked with pools that have school districts, housing authorities, municipalities. I've not yet worked with water districts before a year and a half ago. So actually, it was really fascinating hearing the presentation from the County Water Authority right before us. I am really enjoying learning the operational details of what water districts do. So.
Kevin, your background any more than what I gave him? Yeah, so it's interesting going forward from my perspective, right? You've got somebody who's got a lot of experience in insurance and pooling in particular, and she can tell you some of the horror stories of those JPAs that weren't well funded, that had to go back to members for additional assessments. And now we have Kevin, who has that knowledge of water, and what's that intersection when we start talking about what are the best practices. You know, we could sit there and talk about it from our perspective. Kevin could say, well, you know, as a general manager, I could tell you how this is going to happen at water districts. So moving forward, I'm very excited for the management team we've set in place for the next, you know, hopefully 30 years here as well. Just my 2 bits worth. What's happening? Why are there no refunds this year? We've all sort of touched about it, but I'll just briefly show, and then I have a graphic that, quite frankly, you'll get to see again at conference, so you'll be a step up here. We do deposit premiums at the beginning of the year. We estimate what it's going to cost, liability, property, workers' comp. We make an estimate what it's going to cost. We bill that to the members. And then in essence, we wait 5 years now, and we go back and readjust those costs. We look, what were our claims costs? What did they turn out to be? What are they really incurred? And as Adrian said, you know, 8, 9 times out of 10, we've over-collected. And that's that process there. But there will be those years that we don't. The nice thing is, this is the way the system's designed. This is what it was supposed to do. So we do the premiums. We do those retrospective premium adjustments for all of the programs, for all the open years. It flows into the rate stabilization fund, and if there's excess funds, those come back. And you know, for the last few years, we've been here at Vallecitos to deliver those checks. And would you say a little over 500,000 for Vallecitos in the last few years here? And that's a testament, you know, I love the board, but really kudos to staff, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So here's just a graphic presentation of how that works. We have those retrospective, premium adjustments. We do them every year. If there are excess funds as a result of these adjustments, which normally happens, then we go and we fill up this liability cap fund bucket. And every district has a proportionate share in that. And those are for extraordinary events, unanticipated, probably not covered by excess insurance, that rather than going back to the members for additional funds, we tap into that liability cap fund bucket. So any funds that we have at the retro, first we fill up that liability bucket. We have a similar program in workers' comp. Those have been full for the last couple of years. We flow into this rate stabilization fund, and as Adrian says, that's like a bank account for each member, a savings account, a checking account, and funds flow in and out of that, and each member has their own balance. So in any given year, Vallecitos could have overflowing refunds, and right down the road here at Vista, they're not in that same position. I just picked 2 that are in there. So each district has their own fund. Once that bucket is full, then that's when we give refunds to the member agencies. So that's our normal process. We've been dealing that way for the last 8, 9, 10 years. This year's a little different, however. As a result of those losses that Adrian talked about, we were negative in that. So in other words, the amount of dollars coming from those years that had refunded were not enough to offset those heavy years with the heavy wildfires, the electrocution, and a couple of large flooding claims. So we were a little underwater there. So my arrow here, no water flow, you know, no funds flow into the liability bucket, no funds into the work comp bucket, no funds into the rate stabilization fund. As a matter of fact, at that point, we used funds from the rate stabilization fund to offset those heavy years. So that's what's happening to us this year. It generally happens once or twice every 10 years. We went for a long period of time, so our time here was coming. But this is the way the system was designed. There's nothing broken here. There's no imminent threat to JPI. Our finances are still very strong. We anticipated this would happen. The process is working in that regard. So what I will say, and I'll talk a little bit about Vallecitos now, but overall, we talked about those, the rates being very stable over the years. I'd like to tell you it's all the great work that staff has done over the years, but in reality, it's the effort that staffs for all these water districts put into reducing their exposure to risk, to reducing their cost when there is a claim. That's really what's led to the stability of this program. And to just give you a little bit of an idea here at Vallecitos, you guys are very proactive in the area here. Staff has done a good job. You host training classes. Other water agencies come here to participate in those training classes. We have an online training course. Your staff has taken over 600 courses in the last 12 months to help them in their process of helping reduce that exposure. We have a professional development program. There's 3 courses available there. There's multi-courses you have to get certified to get a certification. We have 1 in water operations, 1 in HR, and new supervisors. You've got 3 employees enrolled in that. We have a leadership program. You have an employee enrolled in that. So what I'm trying to say to you is Vallecitos takes advantage of all of those resources. On the right-hand side, you guys received a grant from our risk control program in 2021 for the gates and the hatches at the MRF, and you continue to participate in our programs. In the past, you've received, your employees have gotten dollar amounts through our safety program. Anytime we do something like that, those safety ideas are shared with the rest of the membership around the state, so that's a plus. On a separate plug here, I think David and Adrian both mentioned, we have what we call, all programs are rated, they have an experience modification factor. So in the liability program, for instance, and I'm looking for my note here so I don't stumble around too much, but I will. So we look at the losses at Vallecitos and we compare them to the average in the pool. And if your loss is better than average, then you get a discount. Your multiplication factor is like 0.8 or 0.9 or something like that. On the flip side, if losses are greater than average, then that multiplication factor becomes 1.1, 1.2. I will tell you that for Vallecitos right now, in the liability program, that is workers' comp. In the liability program, your multiplication factor, 0.59. For a district of your size, that's phenomenal. Heads off to staff. I don't have districts that size with that kind of EMOD there. That's a concentrated effort by staff to really make that work. In essence, you're getting a 40% discount right up front, and you've still managed to get refunds. I would have, if you had asked me, I'd have said, well, they can't be getting very much in refunds because their premium is so far discounted. So heads up. Workers' comp, same thing. In the workers' comp, not quite as good. Your workers' comp EMOD is 0.92. So in both of those programs, your staff is providing or performing better than what's average. And it's a very good pool. To be performing better than average in this pool, you're doing very, very well. So that's kind of it in a nutshell for us. We'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any. I know you've had to sit here through 2 separate lectures, so good luck.
Yeah, I had a question. Adrian, you had a slide up there for the liability program for the tower or the layers of insurers. And I noticed several of them say no dam liability. I just take that a couple ways. But do any of those insurers cover dam liability? Or is it just?
No, we do not. Our memorandum of coverage does not cover dam liability. So we do have members that have dams, and we do have a group purchase dam liability insurance policy. We only have about 8 members that purchase that.
Is that because the risk is so big in that area?
It's a pretty big risk to self-insure, yeah.
Thanks.
One thing I will say is that we do have a standalone program for dams in that process, so it's not that issue, but those carriers specifically call out that exclusion for dams.
Yeah. I would know it. I love this stuff. I mean, the creativity in those towers is amazing. And yeah, simplifying would be awesome, I'm guessing.
Yes.
But no, thank you for that. One question for you. May is your last conference?
Yes, it is.
Then what?
I hope to make sawdust and put grease on the garage floor. I'm a tinkerer. I want to build a shop and.
So it's your last conference in May.
Table saws and joiners and planers. I'll get back on my bicycle. I want to do what I want to do You may see me back. It may not be my last conference, but certainly as CEO. I wouldn't,
I was
think I
wondering.
could do a good job on a water
I was
board.
wondering,
but
well, thank you for
we'll
so
see
many
what
years.
happens.
Appreciate that. So you had me, I thought there was 4 separate pools, which there are, but then you can take water, pun intended, I guess, from one pool for another? Are they 4 distinct separate pools, but you can rob one to fill another one, and you can help? How does that work?
I wouldn't say rob. So
I'm sorry, yeah.
There are,
Take excess from one to fill one that is less full.
yes, so there are 4 distinct pools that the members can share risk in. We
Right.
self-insure a portion of it. Employee benefits needs to kind of be set aside because that's not part of the retrospective premium adjustment process. The way we do, premium adjustments in that is lowering the rate and subsidizing the cost like we did this year by doing a 10% rate decrease to buy down the equity in that program. The other 3 programs, they are, from a financial standpoint, we track them by each program individually, each program year individually, and each member share individually. But we can commingle the funds in the bank and investing, because if you're investing, $90 million versus Vallecitos $25,000, you can get a lot more interest earnings. So the money does get commingled, and when we take money, so I said the workers' compensation program has been performing very well, and that's where a large number of the refunds have been coming from over the last decade, really. So what is happening is members, this is why it's a benefit to participate in all of the JPI's programs like Vallecitos does. If you participate in work comp and property and liability, then if Vallecitos' share in property was you owed $10,000, liability you owed $5,000, but you're getting a refund of $20,000 from work comp, it offsets those. Those members that are we only have 1 or 2 that are only in the property program, they feel the full brunt of the deficits in those years that are underwater. So there's definitely a benefit to participate in multiple of our programs because of the way this process works.
Interesting. Oh, thank you for clarifying.
So
And
the
one-
blending actually happens at the rate stabilization fund. That year, 2016, 17 with the electrocution, it will always show negative, right? But the blending at the bottom, all those years come together, so it gets blended in the rate stabilization fund. It's not that we, actually take money from workers' comp and apply it to liability. It's that when they all get mingled in the rate stabilization fund, that's where that blending happens.
Gotcha. There's blending in desal and water, there's blending in insurance.
Yeah.
I gotcha.
Yeah, you're doing good.
So one last question, not to take, but when raising rates, is there a filing, like, general insurance, there has to be a filing. Is there a regulatory agency that you have to go through if you want to increase rates? Or-
The regulatory agency we have to go through is the executive committee.
And that's it?
That's it. There is no legislative body that oversees joint powers authorities in the insurance JPAs. In the state of California, we're self-regulated.
Okay, okay, thank you.
I have a question. So, I'm not an expert on insurance, but I did hear, it sounds like there are a couple of sentinel events that really made a difference. And looking back, they happened several years ago. So my question, the wildfires are, it's a collection of sporadic events. It's not one thing, but, the tragic incidents with those boys, that's 1 or 2 events, and it made a huge impact. So my question to you is, now that you have the hindsight of a few years, what have you done to try to insulate against something like that happening again, both from a tragic human perspective, of course, but also to mitigate the risk to your member agencies?
Good question.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. Unfortunately, there's not much that we can do to avoid huge wildfires, and the electrocution was, without getting into too many of the details, was truly just a freak accident. There were a lot of, there was multiple people involved in that, not just the water district. PG&E and other entities were also involved in that suit. In terms of what we're doing for the districts to mitigate that, one of the changes that we made this year to this process, and David touched on it a little bit, is we used to adjust program years after 4 years. Water districts, because we don't have police and fire and some other things that tend to drag out the length of a liability claim. Historically, 4 years was enough to know what the actual cost, 90 to 95% of the cost was going to be for each program year. But that's sort of changing. Everybody's risk is getting a little bit worse, quite frankly, in the public entity sphere. And water districts are, we've skirted a lot of that, but we're not able to skirt all of it. So one of the changes we made is we changed that calculation to, instead of adjusting years at the beginning of the 4th year, we adjust them at the end of the 5th year. And the reason for that is so that if there are claims that mature later on in the process, we aren't adjusting those years until they've matured more. And so by the time we get to that first year of adjustment, and by the way, each of these years in each of these programs, we start adjusting them at 5 years, and they continue to be adjusted every year until that year is closed. So there's no claims, there's no anticipated future claims, and all the costs have been paid. So by adjusting later, we're less likely to have situations where we maybe monies have gone into the refund bucket on a year that later becomes upside down, and then we have to pull it back out.
Thank you.
So just a little bit following along there, obviously with the wildfires, our risk management group, which now Kevin is overseeing, has made a real emphasis in the last 3 years here, going out to those mountain communities and seeing what they're doing to reduce their exposure to those wildfires. For the most part, water districts are pretty good, right? You're mostly made out of concrete, steel, and water. But is there defensible space there? Do you have an emergency plan? Do you have backup generators? Those are the things that we go through, that we put special emphasis on for those districts, particularly in the mountain communities. Infrastructure is always the biggest issue for us. Pipe breaks, canal breaches, things like that. So part of that same risk control program that when we're out talking to districts is, do you have an asset replacement program? And are there, I have one particular district that had a lot of breaks on a particular pipeline, right? And so there was something wrong. Did it get installed incorrectly? Are the pressures not being monitored or whatever? So what we said to that district is, at this point, that's too big a risk for the pool. So from now on, you'll take $100,000 of each loss there to sort of put skin in the game. What they ended up doing then is saying, okay, we get it. We were planning to replace this piece of pipe. Now we're going to move that and change it and then directly address this one. So that's, from a risk management point of view, that's what we're looking at, is where are those exposures and what resources? Fire mitigation, how do you reduce your exposure to loss? And then are districts keeping up their capital improvement programs?
Comments or discussion? Well, thank you again for making the trip out and for that explanation. It was very thorough and comprehensive. And we
Thanks for the
understand why we're not
opportunity.
getting a check now. So thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, guys. And good job, staff. EMOD that low, I just don't see it that often for a district.
You didn't tell us our property EMOD though.
Pardon me?
You didn't tell us our property EMOD.
We don't do one in property, and it's kind of interesting in that it's always been our golden child. You just never have any losses. It wasn't until the giant wildfires. And even then, the Thomas Fire, we didn't see a lot of infrastructure loss at the Thomas Fire over at Montecito, or the Carr Fire way up north by Reading. Didn't see a lot of infrastructure loss there. We just had 2 specific instances that got expensive. So far, no EMOD.
I'll share too that just in the risk pooling industry, it's pretty atypical to have an EMOD on property because property losses are deemed to be less easy to control. So an EMOD is usually applied to try to help districts control frequency of losses, not severe losses. Severe losses aren't considered to be something that you can control, but if you have frequent losses, there's something that is not being done from a risk management perspective. And most of the time on a property loss, it's kind of a freak occurrence.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Way more than you wanted, huh? Thank you, gang.
Just right, just right.
Okay, moving on to the consent calendar, or the consent items, rather. These items are designed to be routine and non-controversial. So looking at the consent items, may I have a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented?
I'll move approval of the consent calendar.
Okay, Director Elithart moves. May I have a second, please?
Second.
Director Grosset, second. Any discussion? Okay, please vote. For approval and one absent. Okay, moving on to the action items. Action item 2.1, water supply conditions update and future changes to drought restrictions. And I believe I'm turning this over to
Yeah, Chris can just
Chris.
jump in.
Okay.
Thank you, General Manager Poem. So, Vice President Boyd Hodgson and board members, thanks for having me. Today is a water supply update, as typically has been provided, but also we'll talk about future changes to drought restrictions. So, kind of taking you back through the history of it a little bit. Back in July of 2021, Governor Gavin Newsom issued some executive orders really basically calling on water agencies to reduce their water use by 15%. So in October of 2021, General Manager Poem declared a voluntary level 1 drought watch. That was kind of the next step, asking customers to participate in voluntary practices in reducing their water use. There was a subsequent executive order from Governor Newsom on March 28th of 2022, basically directing agencies to implement level 2 of their water shortage contingency plans, basically getting you to a 20% reduction at that point. So in April of 2022, Vallecitos Board of Directors declares a level 2 drought alert, which is a mandatory condition. And then subsequent to that, the State Water Resources Control Board issued an emergency regulation that expires on June 10th of 2023. So it was in effect for a full year. And I want you to hang on to that June 10th, 2023 date in your mind. Going on to our water supply conditions, here's that drought map from September of 2021. Kind of devastating drought. I mean, horrific drought. And then here we are in April of 2023, where, this is the precipitation map from April 16th, and you can just see that nasty burgundy color is it's just completely gone. So we've had a lot of good measurable rainfall. Here's the Northern Sierra 8 station precipitation index, values of 130% to date. It's that blue line that you're looking at, so just well above average. Really nice figures at the 8 station index, which is kind of up in that Northern California area. And then the snow water content, where we've got, statewide is 249%. So really big in Southern Sierras, really big in the Central Sierras. Pretty good. I mean, really pretty good in the Northern Sierras, but some really vast figures here. The California reservoir storage, I can remember pointing out these figures. It didn't even seem like it was that long ago where they were all just incredibly low. And you can see that Oroville's at 89%, San Luis at 99%. Those are some of the ones that really are connected with us. But then, big giant Shasta Reservoir, 93% of capacity. So these are just fabulous things to be able to report out to you. Snow survey back at Phillips Station near Lake Tahoe. And Sean de Guzman, God, I wish I had his job. That looks fun. I was trotting around in snowshoes, measuring the snow.
Look how happy. Look how happy he is.
You can just see it. Really good data from the snow survey. Here's some other good news. Colorado River snowpack, basin snowpack. You're looking at the really dark figure up there, 146% of average. So that's a good figure there as well. Nice to see that. The tricky part, though, is upper basin precipitation is 127%, but Lake Mead is only 29% full, and Lake Powell is 23% full. And we're hoping to see these reservoirs refill as the snow melts, but there's a certain amount of parchness to the land where a lot of it may just get absorbed, and so those are still troubling figures. The 3-month temperature outlook for us, even chances. Precipitation outlook is below normal favored. And then Governor Newsom came back with an order fairly recently on, what was it, March 24th, basically, I went too far, basically acknowledging the snow season and the rainfall, the precipitation that California's got, and was able to pull back a lot of those drought-related restrictions and dating back to like 2021. So, but the State Water Resources Control Board still has that emergency regulation that expires on June 10th of 2023. So, making the recommendation that the Board of Directors rescind our drought level 2 drought alert effective on that June 10th, 2023 date and declare a drought level 1 drought watch effective the same date. So we would move down from drought level 2 to drought level 1 on June 10th. Some of the good things about that is by doing it on the same date, we're complying with the State Water Resources Control Board's mandates, so we're not flaunting it in their, what their directive was. It allows us to put an announcement in the spring issue of Between the Pipes, kind of the lead story, and let everybody know, hey, starting June 10th, voluntary, we still want you to conserve, but no specific restrictions. And then in case anybody's thinking about, well, maybe we could drop all the way down and out of drought at all, I'm recommending that we stay at level 1, that we stay in the drought watch, and that means that we're being mindful of the problems on the Colorado River. So California's got a lot of snow. There's still some issues on the Colorado River, so not a complete detraction of the drought level. So just going back to a level 1 on June 10th, and I have a suggested motion there that the board could make, and we can start our outreach plan once the board takes action, and I'm ready to take questions.
And I will add to that real quickly. So Chris is right. We could come out of drought level completely. We could rescind and go get out of drought level 1. But I think it's the prudent thing to do to go to drought level 1. The Water Authority is planning on coming all the way out. At their June meeting, they're thinking of rescinding their drought level 1 action. So there may be some inconsistency that we hear from our customers. Hey, the Water Authority is doing this. Vallecitos is doing this. I still think it's the prudent thing to do. I'm not one that likes to overreact, go from one extreme to the other, so I think we slowly move in. If we have a better than expected summer, less water use, maybe less drought conditions, then we can take the further step. But for now, I think going from level 2 to level 1 is the appropriate thing to do.
Questions? Thank you, Mr. Robbins. That was an excellent presentation, as per usual. So I will entertain a motion to move staff recommendation to go from drought level 2 to drought level 1. Oh, did I not say it right?
Effective June
Oh,
10th of 2023?
Effective June 10th, 2023. Thank you.
I can make a motion to approve that.
Okay. Director Pinnock moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Director Grosset, second. Any further discussion? Okay, please vote. Four yeses, one absent. Thank you. Okay, I think we are moving into the reports, correct?
Yes.
And I will turn it over to General Manager Pruitt.
Yeah, thank you, Vice President Boyd Hodgson. So sorry for the lengthy presentation agenda today. It was good information, but it did take quite a bit of time. So thankfully, we only had one action item. So I've got 4 items. I'll try to make them brief. So kind of piggybacking on what Chris was talking about, we all know that the Colorado River is having problems, right? Dan Denham was here, he talked all about this. It's not a new problem. This has been developing for probably a couple of decades now. Back in 2007, the Federal Bureau of Reclamation, and they're the group that oversees the operation of the Colorado River. So they operate Hoover Dam and Glen Canyon Dam on Lake Powell. They adopted what they called a 2007 interim shortage guidelines. And what this did is say, how do we need to operate the river based on these drought conditions and the overdemands that we're placing on there? So these guidelines were in place since 2007, and they govern the operation of the river. And they're due to expire in 2026. So that's just a couple of years away. It's not very far. But based on the extremely low reservoir levels and the conditions we've seen recently, the Bureau of Rec actually wants to look at the 2007 guidelines and make some interim modifications until we get new regulations that take place, or new governing guidelines in 2026. So what they've done is they've done some reports, and they've issued a document called a supplemental environmental impact statement. So this is a document that basically says, hey, we're going to revisit how we manage the river. There's potentially environmental impacts to that, so we need to study it. And they have to go through this rigorous process through CEQA, which means they have to prepare the document, circulate it, receive comments, and then take a final action. So the document they prepared actually looks at three alternatives. The one is just a baseline, do nothing. Let's just operate the river the way we've been doing it. So that's the baseline. And then there's two alternatives. So the first alternative recognizes the existing priority water rights system. So they're basically saying, hey, California has better water rights than Nevada or Arizona. We need to recognize that. We need to respect it. So if we want to reduce demands on the Colorado River, those two agencies with lower, or two states that with lower priority rights are going to take a bigger cut. So that's alternative one. Alternative two says, hey, let's just make everybody take an equal haircut. We all take an equal percentage cutback so that we don't continue to drain Lake Powell and Lake Mead. So that's what's out there for review, for people to comment and say, hey, which scenario do we like? And it's really going to strengthen the divide, highlight the divide between California and the others, because California has the most senior water rights. And clearly, it's in the best interest of these other agencies to try to have everybody share the pain equally. So what you're going to see in the coming months is different comments from different agencies supporting their position. California will be rooting their argument in law, the law of the river. There's been Supreme Court decisions. We're going to rely on the law. Doesn't mean that the Bureau of Reclamation will choose that option. If they don't, I would guess that there'll be lawsuits that will ensue. Comments on the draft supplemental environmental impact statement are due May 30th. So I've started to review the document. It's a mere 400 and something pages. We're working with the Water Authority and with other member agencies to try to figure out the best way to put our comments. This is the type of issue that all member agencies of the County Water Authority and basically all water agencies in California have the same interests at heart. Does it make sense to have 24 different letters go in on this? I don't know. The Water Authority has some concerns if they put a group letter together and for some reason not all member agencies sign on, it may lessen its importance. They call those NASCAR letters. It'll be one letter, but it'll have the logo of all the agencies. They've had experience in the past, either because of philosophical differences or inaction, they haven't gotten the logos from all 24 member agencies, and they've heard from the state or the feds that says, hey, you can't even get support from all your member agencies. Why should we listen to your letter? So we're trying to work through that issue. My guess is that we may be issuing a letter that's unique to Vallecitos, but it'll have a lot of commonality and look very similar to letters from other agencies. So information only, a lot of work, but this continued problem with the Colorado River isn't going away soon. Second item I want to share, there's going to be a shutdown of the water system along San Marcos Boulevard from Las Posas all the way to Bent, starting this Sunday night at 8 p.m. until Monday morning at 8 a.m. So a 12-hour shutdown. It's related to the City of San Marcos's Creek District project. They're moving forward with their bridge work, and they need to redo some of the water systems that are in there. So they're reconnecting, and in order to connect the new water system to the existing water system, we have to shut down. We isolate the portion of the system we have to shut down, and unfortunately, that puts a lot of businesses and residences out of water. The City of San Marcos has hired a consultant to do the outreach, so that's the agency and the entity that's going to be reaching out to these customers. Chris is in contact with them. We're not going to be taking the lead on the communication, but we're going to be mirroring the communication. We don't want to have two separate messages going out. So the city's consultant prepares the message, and Chris will glean the information and share it on our website. The good news, it's a relatively short duration, 12 hours, Sunday night till Monday morning, and we're keeping our fingers crossed that by Monday morning at 8 o'clock, water's back on. But things can go wrong, but hopefully they won't in this case.
Can that be shared on social as well so that we can pick it up and share it?
That was exactly one of the big points I was making with their consultant. They were working to talk to the businesses, but they weren't putting an effort out to talk to the people, which was making me disappointed in that you have people that have a routine. They're going to go to this coffee shop at 7 in the morning, and that's their routine to go do that. They need to know that as well. The business knows they won't be open, but what about the customers of those businesses? And so that was my big point with their outreach team was you got to tell this to everybody, not just the businesses.
Okay,
So
well,
we've made that correction.
Great, thank you. So I'll watch the website and then we can push it out as well. And we'll just push out exactly what's written. That way the message is consistent.
And one disappointing aspect of this issue is that the city of San Marcos, in their written stuff, they're saying it's a maintenance issue of Vallecitos Water District, and it's not. We're shutting it down so their project can connect to the water system. If they weren't doing their project, we wouldn't be doing the shutdown. So it's a little unfortunate, but we don't want to get in we're not going to get in a fight with them about wordsmithing. We want to make sure the word gets out there. But we may take a few lumps because of that.
General Manager, today I was able to correct that.
Oh, awesome.
So
Thank you, Chris.
the initial offering was reading that it was our shutdown, and it's really not. It's a shutdown on their behalf.
Said that earlier today when we were out there.
Yeah.
We talked.
So that's Las Posas de Bent? So there's no like retirement homes, things like that, hospitals? I mean, trying to think, there's nothing.
There's nothing like a hospital. I don't think there's any retirement facilities. There's a mobile home park that may be affected in that area. A lot of small businesses.
Right.
All of Restaurant
All
Row.
Restaurant Row, right.
It's out.
But I mean,
Movie
it's
theater.
Midnight to, it's 8, what'd you say it was? Midnight to 8 a.m.?
Yeah, no, 8 p.m.
Oh, 8
on
p.m.
Sunday
Oh,
to
okay.
8 a.m. So for example, the movie theater, they may not have a late showing that night. But that's up to them to figure out what to do. Our job was to notify them, and the city's job was to notify them that the water will be out. All right, just two more quick items. We had our South Lake ribbon cutting ceremony today. It was an awesome day, beautiful blue skies and green hillsides and a fill reservoir. It was awesome, and thanks for those of you who showed up. It was nice. It was good attendance overall. And the last one, just want to mention you probably know that we participate in the County Water Authority's intern program. They get interned and go through a rotation. We're one of the agencies that's been a repeat customer. We support it every year, and thanks to Ed and his teams, they're always welcoming these interns in. They're getting ready to accept applicants for their next cycle, which I think starts in the fall. We are once again participating, and I've asked Chris to reach out to Palomar College to let them know so that the students there can apply to the Water Authority to be part of the intern program. And that's all I have for reports.
General Counsel?
Thank you. I just had a short report. I was going to mention the Biden administration issuing the SEIR, but Glenn's taking care of that. I think what will be interesting in that is the game of Water Thrones that's being played, because they failed to take a side relative to California and Arizona, and principally, I think, to force negotiations so that people will come to their own conclusion. But there are some dramatic implications to water rights, depending on how it moves forward. If they decline to endorse the senior water rights priority issues, I'm sure there will be litigation and lots of it. The other thing I wanted to mention is Glenn mentioned that all of you are headed to Aqua in Monterey next month. I offered to Glenn, I don't know if I can get it arranged if anyone is interested. Monterey One has a pure water facility there that they do tours of, and it's a facility that converts municipal wastewater, the crop water from Salinas and that into injectable water that goes into the groundwater basin and is withdrawn for drinking water. Currently, it's producing about 3,500 acre feet per year of water through that processes. Just 2 weeks ago, we were able to sign an agreement for an expansion of that. So Cal-Am, who's the private water purveyor to the city of Monterey, is going to take more of that water. So there's an expansion project that they're going to be undertaking under WIFIA finance loans, et cetera. So it's a neat facility. If you're interested, I can try to make arrangements with Monterey One for a tour one of those 3 days while you're up there. I know the schedule might be a little packed, but if you're at all interested, any of you, while you're there.
I am.
Okay, let me see what I can arrange for a time, and I'll let you know.
Thank you.
So that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. San Diego County Water Authority.
Okay, I'll try to be brief. A lot going on there right now with budget development and budget deliberations. So next week is Water Authority's regular April board meeting, Thursday the 27th. However, over the month of April, the board's admin and finance committee has held 2 budget workshops to review the draft 2-year budget, which is FY24 and FY25. It's a proposed $1.85 billion 2-year budget, $1 billion, and with a anticipated rate increase impact of about 13.7%. That's kind of all in average across all the agencies. Staff is looking for cost-saving measures to try to get that rate impact down. Several board members and agencies have indicated they want to get that to single digits. That's a pretty tall order. There's limited options. Staff with these 2 presentations went through all the operating departments and identified about $4.6 million worth of cuts that they could tolerate. And if the board implemented all those, that's a less than a 1% impact to rates. Their rule of thumb is about $5 million for every 1% of rate impact. So the only other issue is, if we took all those, yeah, we could probably knock that down 1%. But the other biggie is the CIP, the capital program. And it's some hard choices there to try to defer capital projects that they indicate all of them are critical to do now. They really can't put any of them off. So I don't see much hope in getting that big rating, that proposed rate increase down that much. We'd be very lucky to get it to 10%. So budget deliberations are going to continue next week at the regular board meeting, and then they've got 2 more budget workshops scheduled for May. So I don't know what else will transpire or what magic they can come up with, but I don't see much hope. So we're looking for, after May, we're looking for a budget approval by the board in June. So stay tuned, I guess. That's my report.
All right. Encino Wastewater.
Director Elliot's more detailed than I am, but similar response. We had our Policy and Finance Committee meeting. Cause for concern, just they've lost some revenue to a south parcel that they were leasing out. They've also, just with the cost of energy and chemicals skyrocketing, they also we're looking for a pretty increased budget. I don't have the details in front of me, but I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know if I should say it here, 17% increase. And again, do you have that?
Yeah, so their operating budget is actually increasing by over 20% from current to next year proposed, but their capital they're proposing to decrease by about 6%. So I forget what the net number is. It's an increase, but it's less than 10% overall.
Right,
blended.
okay. And I was, the operating side, again, just energy and chemicals is just, so they're also trying to implement some cuts, but it's going to be a hit and something that's probably going to affect us down the road.
Okay. Standing committees.
Yeah, I've got a couple. We had 2 finance committee meetings over the past couple months. The first was on March 17th. Focused on the FY24, the VWD FY24 budget development. We went over the overall budget preparation process And the other item we discussed was other post-employment benefits funding status. So in our second Finance Committee meeting was April 11th, and we reviewed preliminary salaries and benefits, the operating budget, and the proposed capital budget. And so the next steps are a budget workshop for the full board coming up, I would assume, in May. So that's it.
Any other standing committees? Okay. That's the end of the reports. Moving on to other business, 4.1 meetings. I'm not sure what that means.
None, I hope. It means no more meetings. No more meetings.
Yeah, that's just if there's an upcoming meeting like an Aqua that you weren't aware of. It's
Okay,
those types
all
of
right,
things.
thank you, thank you. Yes, Aqua is coming up next month, and I believe we are all going.
All
Is that
5
right?
directors will be there.
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
Is that a first?
It's first in a long time, not the first, but first in a long time.
Okay, that is the end of the other business. Directors' comments, future agenda items. Any other ideas, comments, things that you would like to see on a future agenda item that you would like to put forward to the board and have someone agree? Okay. I think that means we are all set, right? Okay, great, we are adjourned.